All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Professional Brotherhood podcast. Good evening, Kara. How are we today?
Good evening. I'm living the dream. How about you?
I am living the dream. We are beyond another snowstorm. The clocks have changed. And, even though I'm a winter guy, it looks like spring is around the corner.
Everybody checked their smoke detectors and did their test and their
Yes.
Edith drill today. So we're all on board.
Okay, good. So I'm excited. I'm excited to have a couple guests on this evening. We have Lieutenant Cecil Hunter back from Liberty Fire Department here in my area. He was on I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes ago. Thanks for coming back, Cecil. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Absolutely. And we are also joined by Lieutenant Stephen Vogler, also from the Liberty Fire Department. Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
So those of you, well, if you're listening to the podcast, you probably pay attention to our social media as well. And I shared a video from a fire that we had here locally in the Liberty Fire District, where these guys are both firefighters, that resulted in a Mayday call. Stephen was that Mayday call. We shared that video that was taken from a civilian out on the street, I believe. We shared that video. To say it went viral is an understatement. I don't know. The last time I checked, it was like 50,000 shares or some crazy number, but it definitely got out there. And the video was of him hanging out the window, mid bailout off the 5th floor of this building. And I'm happy to have these guys on tonight to talk about the fire, to talk about the event, to talk about things leading up to and where things eventually went. Obviously, first of all, I'm extremely happy that the 4 of us are able to get together and talk about this event, because it could have gone much, much worse. And I've thought about it several times and thought about the fact that, excuse me, we already had a line of duty death here in Sullivan County this year. And I really, really think that we were seconds away from somebody getting either gravely injured or worse. So get that out of the way first. I'm happy that we're all here. And Stephen, I'm obviously very happy that you're here to talk to us. So where do we want to start? Kara, where do we want to start?
Well, I think, absolutely. It's very good that we can all be here talking about the incident. And I appreciate everybody's willingness to come and talk about it, because, I think that it's so important to have a discussion and open forum about these events as firefighters, so that, we can all learn from each other's experiences, good, bad, indifferent, whatever happened. I think that's really important.
Sure.
So I think, first of all, just, if I know all 3 of you obviously were there at this fire. So just why don't we start with, what did the call come in as? What kind of building, is this in the district, and what was your familiarity with it?
Steve, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so to give a little background, it helps if I start off with, I was a police officer in the Village of Liberty for about 3 years, which is where the incident took place. So I was fortunate to have some very good familiarity with the building. A couple of years ago, we had an incident there that opened our eyes to, that was a building of concern that we needed to train on. That was back when Cecil was newer to the department, and he had a background with the standpipes and large structures. So we organized a drill with the building manager, and it was back in October of 2020. We did some aerial ops, standpipes, building familiarization, and it was overall a really good drill to get us in the right mindset for what took place.
Yeah, absolutely.
what is the building used for? Is it residential? Because I know in the video, it's just a really short clip. I know a lot of people saw it and might not know the area well.
So it's a 5-story concrete building. It's senior housing. It's not an assisted living, but it is like a senior housing. And it's kind of set up with a general idea of what you would picture a hotel to look like. At 5
Okay.
stories with probably 6 apartments on each side, separated by an elevator in the middle with a fire door on each side, and a standpipe and the staircase on each end.
Gotcha. Okay. Is it a building you guys get called to a lot?
Wouldn't say we get called there a lot, but we're familiar with it. Mostly activated alarms, your occasional culinary disaster. All the rooms in there are concrete, so you're not really worried about extension, and the hallways are sprinkled.
Okay. Good. That gives everybody a good background. Thank you. So
So-
Cecil, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Cecil, I was just going to ask you what was your role when the call came in? What did it originally come in as?
So my role when it came in was the guy who wasn't going to waste his time on an automatic alarm. I was just getting off of work. I was on my way home, and it came in as an automatic alarm. So we didn't think anything of it. A couple of us guys are in a group chat together, and it was just your run-of-the-mill automatic alarm. The guys who were around were going to go, and the guys who weren't going to go out of their way to go. It was supposed to be a 5-minute ordeal. You go there, you see that it's fine, and then you leave.
Gotcha. And when did that change?
So our assistant chief got on scene, and as he got on scene, I guess people started to come down and tell him that there was a lady trapped upstairs and there was a fire. And at the same time, the county updated them and told them that you just went from automatic alarm to a working fire. So he requested a second alarm, and a bunch of other departments were en route, and that's when I then started to head to.
Sorry.
Dog's awake.
Crazy's here.
So Steve, when you, which one of you guys got on scene first as far as, which one of you got?
Steven got on scene before me.
Okay. So when you got there, were you in the apparatus or were you in a POV?
POV.
Okay. So what did you got there prior to it being upgraded to an actual working fire?
No.
Okay.
I live pretty far out from the station, so by the time I got there, it was already 911 actually upgraded it to a working fire within probably a minute or two of the initial dispatch.
Oh, okay. All right.
When I got there, we had I think our engine, our ladder, and our rescue were already on scene.
Gotcha. So what were some initial challenges that you guys saw right out of the gate as soon as the call got upgraded to that working fire and you started arriving on scene? What are some of the challenges that you felt that you had to deal with out of the gate there?
So for my initial arrival on scene, it was a little bit of unorganized chaos going on, because you have what did we say, 55 tenants there, an unknown amount of visitors. So all the people from the lower floors were evacuating out the front door. We had a captain by the front door, and they were stretching pre-connects off the engine from the parking lot through the front door, down the hallway, and up the staircase.
Right. So
there was cops in there stretching the hand line. You got people running out of their apartments. They're scared. They don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on either. So it was chaos.
Right. And how can I put this? I've been there on EMS runs before, and it's the type of building where you always kind of have people just wandering, right? And even in an emergency situation, even though you're saying, hey, there's a fire in the building, you need to get out, they're still right. I'm not off base on this, right? They're still kind of
Yeah.
just wandering, right? Wandering out, wandering back in.
Yeah. So even on my way up the stairs after Steven's incident, there was still a guy just hanging out underneath the stairs. You know, just an old dude, kind of with all the chaos going on, all the smoke in the building. He's just hanging out underneath the stairs. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just standing here." And then I had another old lady who tried to come in to go to the bathroom in the middle of the incident. She found her way back in, and she was trying to come to go to the bathroom. So it was just kind of one of those things where there were so many access points that you had people who you might have thought were out that were coming right back in. So
Yeah,
it was all over the place.
Yeah. So let's talk about let's dive into a couple of things. So let's talk about building identification, right? Building labeling. So you guys just said that when you got there, they were stretching a hand line off the engine into the hall, down the hall, into the main entrance, down the hall, up the stairs. All right. You guys have trained there before, so there's standpipes there. All right. That entrance, that main entrance, is off of a side street. That's not off of what we'll call the main road through Liberty there, North Main Street. So I know some of the confusion as other firefighters started to arrive on the scene was, what's the front of the building, or the A side, all right, or the one side if you're from somewhere else. What's the A side, and what's not? Right. There were guys calling the North Main Street side the A side of the building, which is the front from the most traveled roadway, but the actual main entrance to the building was where that first initial line got stretched. So there was some confusion there. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. So when I got there was no real command post established. I mean, we knew that there was a captain at the front door, and that the chief was inside, who was like technically in charge.
Right.
So when everyone arrived, they're actually coming off that main road that you spoke about. So everyone's getting off their fire trucks and they're just standing there. That's the A side to them, like you said, which caused a bunch of confusion, because then when they went in for their fire attack, they actually ended up in different stairwells. So the chief is calling for lines, and these guys are hooking up the standpipe in the opposite stairwell to him, because he's telling them go to the right, and the right's their left, and the left's their right. So there was that whole confusion there.
Yeah, I wish I had a Madden board here. If I had a Madden board, this would be really cool, because I could kind of like draw the building
draw it out.
So
right.
Yeah, so if you can picture this, right, where their engine was parked, it's a parking lot per se. There's a main entrance into the building, which that main entrance actually brings you in on floor 2, right? So it is a 6-story built, right? 6-story building. It is a 6-story building, 1 below grade. I have this right? I'm not off base on this. Okay, 1 below grade, and then 5 above. Okay. So you've got that challenge too. If you're on the North Main Street side of the building, looking at the building, counting windows, you would actually count 6 stories, right? But if you came in from where the engine was parked, you're at grade, there's a floor below you, and then 5 floors above you. So you also had a staircase to the right and a staircase to the left, which these guys have labeled, right? Stairwell 1, stairwell 2. They know that from training there. All right. But again, I wouldn't know that coming in. If you said, hey, go to stairwell 1, I wouldn't have a clue where stairwell 1 was. But you could see where the confusion is. So there's guys operating in 2 different staircases, 2 different standpipes. Plus they had the initial line stretched down the hall, which actually ended up getting abandoned once the standpipe was charged. Right. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Right. A lot of stuff that could get very easily confused.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said that the chief was inside and the captain was outside, and then you had mutual aid incoming to get assignments. How were assignments handled at that point?
So I think Stephen can speak more to that.
So when we initially got there, the I was only on scene for so long, so I can't tell you when the bulk of majority of mutual aid got on scene, what happened. But when I first got there, it was just the chief screaming on the radio, get to the 5th floor. And I think that was pretty common throughout the process, was just get your interior guys and get up to the 5th floor.
Right.
They were trying to get mutual aid to come in and hook hydrants and do whatever, but the biggest thing was just interior guys, just go, when you get here, go up to the 5th floor.
So
Gotcha.
they kept requesting more people as they ran out of people. So the chief would have a kind of a lapse in how many people he had. He would call outside to the captain, I need this. He would say, I have no more people. And the chief would request 2 more departments. And then you're getting, their guys come in and just like I said, the first thing they told them is just come up to the 5th floor. So really no assignment other than get to the 5th floor. And then once you got there, it kind of give you a job.
Gotcha.
So one of the things I think we identified, after the after action and talking over was, obviously accountability was a major issue. I mean, these guys just said it. We when we were talking the other night, we talk about all this textbook stuff in officer school, right? And one of the things that we often, that we always hit on is the fast attack. And I know when I talk about a fast attack in officer class, I usually have a class full of officers go, well, what the hell is a fast attack? Like what even is that, right? Well, it's pretty much what the chief did the other night, right? All right, so he got on the scene, saw something that needed his immediate attention, right? Went in the building, immediately started acting, trying to do his thing, trying to get people to where they needed to go. They did have other officers arrive on the scene. Like they said, there was a captain outside the door. Probably the misstep was that at that point, the chief should, and we talked about this, so I can say this, right? But probably at that point, the chief should have either said, all right, I'm going to go back outside and position myself at the command post, or, hey, Cap, you're running command because I'm now committed to interior operations and we're going to run it that way. But what happened was, because you had this main door and then they had a door going into each stairwell, I believe, right? There's a door that goes into each stairwell. They're continuous in calling for more manpower and backing up to the kind of confusion over where everybody was in the building. People were coming in the building from 3 different entrances and never really making it to, some were, but not all of them were really making it to where he was looking for the manpower. So he's calling for manpower, and they might have been in the building, but just never got to the guy that was actually looking for the manpower. So you can see where this accountability piece definitely got very confusing for a lot of people. And like Cecil said, at one point there was, and Steven said it too. I mean, and he wasn't out roaming around like some of the rest of us were. There were state troopers in the building. There was Liberty PD in the building. There was firemen flowing around everywhere. I mean, at one point there was a lot of people in there, and I think the confusion was nobody was coming through a centralized staging area / command post,
Right.
we'll say. So that I think that was a challenge.
Right. And so where the fire itself was on the 5th floor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It was like room and contents, or because Stephen, you said it's the type of building construction is not typically conducive to quick spread.
Yeah, so if you want me, I'll go through with the next step of my timeline here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I got on scene. They're stretching hose lines from the engine through the parking lot, through the hallways, which was a little disheartening for me to see because we've trained on this specific building before. And the fact that we're stretching hand lines and not pulling high-rise packs off the truck, that was a little bit of an issue. So I got up to the top of the staircase. I kind of had to collect myself for a minute, stop yelling at everybody. And we had a mutual aid chief and one of his lieutenants, and I had 2 of my newer guys, my green guys, up at the top of the staircase. They had brought part of the high-rise pack with them, but not the full ensemble. So I got with them and we were able to hook into the standpipe, and that initial hand line that they were stretching up to the 5th floor, we were able to disconnect that and use that as our 1 3/4 on the hand line. So I got those guys collected there, and when we entered the hallway on the 5th floor, there was black smoke all the way down to the ground, which told me that there was going to be obvious fire somewhere in that hallway, because there should be a apartment door open with flames blowing out of it.
Right.
So me and the mutual aid chief and the lieutenant, we all went and did a quick primary search to try and find if there's anybody in the hallway and if there's fire, if we could locate the fire. And I had my 2 new guys behind me with a hand line to put out the fire once we located it. Well, we made that whole stretch of the hallway, made it to where the chief was by the elevator on the other side of the fire door, and we didn't find any fire.
So the fire, so essentially all the apartment doors were closed. Nothing was left open.
All of them were closed and everyone that I checked was locked.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So how'd you eventually find the fire room and the victim that you guys removed?
So I met up with the chief, and at this time I didn't know that there was people trapped.
Sure.
I met up with the chief. He told me there's a woman trapped on the 5th floor. We got to find her. So went back into the hallway, and the first door I went into, banged on the door. A woman opened it, and she just fell right to the ground, and she had chosen death. She was going to die right there. There's no way to get her into the hallway because some medical conditions and the fact that the hallway was completely compromised.
Mm-hmm.
So the mutual aid chief stayed with her, made sure she was okay at the window, and we continued on with our search. Meanwhile, my guys on the hose line during that time were able to get 2 or 3 more people out of their apartments on the other end of the hallway and bring them down to lower floors where state troopers or whoever were able to get them out of the building.
Right.
So if you want to step in at any point. But,
No. So as they're searching the hall, they're just banging on doors basically. And if somebody opened
Trying
up,
to clear it out.
yeah, if somebody opened up, you're like, oh, okay, surprise, let's get you the hell out of here. And
I think we found out there was somebody in every one of those rooms.
Yeah. Okay.
On the fire floor.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And the building's sprinklered, and I'm assuming it's like a all interconnected alarm system. Was the alarm going off and people were just staying where they were?
That was part of the issue, was the alarm system going off as well. You couldn't hear anything, you couldn't see anything.
Right.
But luckily the residents there had enough peace of mind to stay in their room, go to the window, and just, as 911 calls were coming in, 911 was advising people, get to the window, the fire department will get to you.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. Okay. So we identified there's some people in the room. Some we end up getting out. Some they're sheltering in place. And then what continues to happen?
So we're getting people out, and we only have the 5 of us, minus
Right.
1 because the mutual aid chief is in with the 1 woman that's sheltering in place.
Mm-hmm.
And we're losing guys because they're running out of air. And we had one of my guys comes up to me that was on the hose line and says, "Hey, we just cracked this door open and a big puff of smoke came out of it." Like, okay, so that's a good sign. And at that same time, another Lieutenant Bradley from White Sulphur shows up, and he's fresh. He just got there. So I told him, "Hey, we need to go in this room, do a quick primary search, and get out of the way for the hose line to get in there." And that's when things got interesting.
All right. Okay. So now we're in the fire room, right? Now we're in the actual fire room. You guys go in to do a primary search. Door closes behind you, right?
So I have my guy that's on the hose line.
Yep.
I had him position himself outside the door, told him don't close this door on me, keep it cracked, but I also don't want you to keep it wide open and compromise the hallway again.
Good call.
So me and Lieutenant Bradley are going in. I got my guy on the hose line outside the door, and we're doing our primary search.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Carrie, you good to hear? You got a question? Go ahead.
Nope, keep going. I'm
Okay.
listening.
What's coming up?
Okay. All right. So now you're in there, you're doing your primary search. Your guys are at the door. You told them keep it cracked. Keep going.
So Lieutenant Bradley's in front of me. We enter into this room, and they're not big rooms. And
Right.
when we did our familiarization training, we did it in the same exact room. We had our ladder truck with the bucket to the window. We did familiarization. We stretched the high-rise packs in the same exact room. So when we got in there, it was black smoke to the floor. It wasn't hot, but as soon as we got into the open area of the room, it was hoarder conditions. You couldn't get anywhere. It was just stuff all over the place. But I told Bradley that, let's just a quick, basic primary search by the books, right-hand search if you have to, and give it a shot, and then we'll get out of here.
Right.
That just wasn't working out. Couldn't make our way around the room. So from my familiarization of the room, I remembered directly across from the door you come in, there's a window. So I told Greg, pop the window. I'm going to go back, get the guys on the hose line, and we'll do a quick hydraulic vent, open it up so we could see what we're working with. And he found the window right away, popped the window, and I couldn't find my way out. We were just disoriented. I knew the layout of the room, but we just couldn't find the way out. And that's when my low air alarm goes off.
So let's hold off. Let's hold here for a minute, because I think this is a really, really important point to make, right, for people listening, because right, we talk about coordinated tack all the time and things like that. Some guys get it, some don't. All right. But so you give Lieutenant Bradley direction. All right, let's pop that window. I'll go get the hose line. We'll get some hydraulic ventilation going out, right? Not a bad call, right? You want to clear clear the room a little bit so you can see a little bit better, right? But he gets to the window, pops the window, but now we don't have the water part of the equation to bring in and quickly do that hydraulic ventilation, right? Plus, and again, so now for a solid week here, I've listened to the audio a bunch of times. I've watched that video over and over and over again. And after speaking with you guys the other night, really, really helped out quite a bit, because there was a couple questions in my mind. I'm like, how did we get here? How did we get to where you can see in the video from what would be the D side where it's lighting off at the ceiling, right? And it's lighting off at that window. Like you can see that happening, right? So this timeline makes 100% sense, because what happened was, right, he took that window, you're looking for the door to get that hose line in there, and that air is coming in, and that's why we see that thing lighting up at the ceiling, because now it's not getting the air that it was getting before when it was still a sealed compartment, right? We think that's a pretty good, yeah. So there's so much stuff that we talk about and we train about and we learn about all the time, right? We're seeing it play out in real time with you guys in the building, right? So keep going. Oh, did you want to add? Kara, did you have something before we keep going?
No. So at this point, you still did not have an idea like where the fire was.
We assumed we were in the fire room.
Visibility.
We assumed we were in the fire room, but there was no fire. There was no heat. It was just black smoke trapped in the apartment.
Right.
And the line was outside of the door. You guys were just in that capacity as a two-man search.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Which makes it makes sense, because if that compartment was, if the compartment. The apartment, which is our compartment, right, was totally sealed, right? No windows
Mhm.
broken, doors closed. It's
Right.
it's not getting any air, right? That's
Right.
eventually what's going to happen. The fire is not going to, it's not going to continue to burn, right? It's just going to burn itself out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You
All
didn't
right.
have all the tetrahedron.
Yeah, we had,
Right.
yeah,
You're
we had
missing part.
right. We were missing the
You're
part of
missing
the
part of the tetrahedron. Right.
tetrahedron. Right. All right. All
Right.
right, Steven, keep going.
All right, so he had just taken the window. Can't find my way out, and my low air alarm goes off. So it made sense to me where I'm going to go to the window. I'm going to put my head out the window, take my regulator off, and conserve the little air that I have left. Greg's got a fresh bottle. He's going to search the room and try and find our way out because right now we're trapped. So it turns out the apartment door got shut. However that happened, it
Right.
was shut off on us. And the layout of the room, you come down a small hallway, open space, bedroom, living area, and like a short hallway of a kitchen, like a closet of a kitchen with a light on in it. So it kept drawing you towards that light. So Greg kept getting sucked into that kitchen every time he's looking for the way out. So every few seconds, hey Greg, how you making out? You find that door? You find the door? And this is going on for a few minutes. It's not really an emergency. Like it sucks what's going on, but there's no fire. There's not that pressing factor of we're in trouble just yet.
Right. We're separated, but we're not in freak out mode yet. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still within 10 feet of each other, this whole situation. So it's
Right.
not a big deal.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, I'm looking out the window down on the main street, and our ladder truck is there just hanging out in the street, and there's nobody around. So I'm trying to get attention of the few like bystanders or whoever's out on the street, like, hey, if we could get our bucket up to the window, that would be cool. But there's nobody around, and the few bystanders that are around weren't able to help.
Mhm.
So it's still not a emergency, but it would be nice if our ladder truck was up to the window. So that's going on, and it goes on for a few minutes. What felt like forever, but a few minutes. And then all of a sudden, I'm at the window and I hear Greg screaming behind me. So I clip my regulator in quick, put my head into the room, and you watch the video where the fire was, that whole corner of the room everything was on fire. So I made a mad dash back to where Greg was. If we're going to find that door, we're going to find it right now. And that's when I felt the skin melting off of my head. I knew there's no time. We're going out the window.
Right.
You know,
So both of you now are heading back for the window. You and Greg both go back for
Yes.
the window now?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is when you're at the window, and did you have to take the window? Did you just open the window up? What?
So the window's already open from
Okay.
before.
From before, right? Okay.
Yeah. So I just jumped right out the window.
Gotcha.
Did a leg lock, just jumped right out. But the window's only so big. I'm saving myself, but I could still hear Greg screaming right behind me. I need to get the hell out of the way so he can get out.
Right.
So
right.
I got my entire body out the window, tied my bailout rope off real quick, and then I grabbed him and pulled him through the window with me. So at least his whole torso's out of the window.
Okay. So this is now this is going on, and I imagine this is when the Mayday happens, right? Right. Cecil, is this is when the Mayday happens, you think?
That would be a good time for a Mayday to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
When did it actually happen? I don't know a matter of timeline.
Right.
Right as he settled in on the windowsill, another guy from a room over had actually ended up seeing him. But there was also someone on the radio who randomly just screams, "There's a guy about to jump out of the window."
Okay. And that All right, so I think we got to back up a minute because I think we got to
Right.
add a couple components into this, which will make it all make a little bit more sense for anybody listening. So, how we operate here in our county, like many, all right, ours is just we operate a little bit on the smaller side. So we have one main channel, which is a simulcasted channel that we utilize for FireCom, which is between units and 911, okay, or our FireCom. On the opposite side of our bank, we have the same exact channel, does the same exact thing. It's designated for EMS com. In between there, you've got every battalion is assigned a ground or tactical channel, which is what we're supposed to utilize when we're operating on the fire ground. Okay. We won't get into the whys or why nots, but pretty much this entire operation was going on the FireCom channel. Okay. Pretty much everything. I mean, I drove from my driveway to the fire and felt like I was standing at the fire. Like I could hear every single radio transmission, right? Every ground transmission, every search transmission, every piece of fire apparatus leaving the firehouse, wherever there was coming from, like every single transmission, like no exaggeration. So everything was going on this FireCom channel. When the Mayday gets called, all right, the Mayday that we hear, or we all hear, was also on the FireCom channel from that initial mutual aid chief that Stephen first went in with, right? That they all.
So he's still hunkered down with that woman that we initially found in the primary search.
Right. So he's the one that looks out the window, calls the Mayday on the FireCom channel. No, now I've heard that somebody slightly before that over the ground channel possibly said, hey, there's somebody hanging out the window, right? But the problem was nobody was listening to that ground channel, because I know for me personally, like I usually, when I get on the fire ground, if I'm going mutual aid, the first thing I usually do when I get in my truck is I put my portable on the tac channel, on the ground channel. I didn't do this at that fire because I knew damn well that nobody was going to be listening to it, because I had already listened to the entire, I listened to everything on the way up there. So I left my radio on FireCom. So none of us heard that initial, hey, there's a guy hanging out the window. What we did hear was Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And actually the way it came out was fireman out the window. We got a bailout. We got a bailout. So now we're all going, oh, fuck. All right. We're thinking he's already out. Like he's out. Right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking shit, somebody just literally went out the 5th floor window and he's out, like out on the ground out. All right. So go ahead. You guys keep going from there, and I'll jump in with my piece as we need.
So before Stephen actually, right when he's bailing out, like you said, the Mayday, and somebody says there's a fireman out the 5th floor window, down in the front of he said the front of the building. So myself, I was actually in the stairwell making my way up to go find Stephen and help him search. When they said that, I ran back down. I'm an EMT. I figured, whatever, if I can help, I can help. So I ran back down and saw Stephen hanging out of the window. So that was pretty crappy. Me and Stephen talk every day. So to see my buddy hanging out of the window was pretty shitty. At that point, the fast team was just making their way up to the building, and I was able to get with those guys and start to make my way up there. Once I got up there, I actually ended up meeting up with you, Brian, and you kind of took control of the rescue. And so, I mean, you can.
So go ahead, Kara.
Well, I was just going to say, so Brian, you were there initially on a different capacity, but then you ended up on this like fast.
Well, so we were initially dispatched. We run joint fast now with Monticello. So it's a town fast rapid intervention team. So we were initially dispatched as the fast.
Mhm.
En route, I don't even think I was en route for 2 minutes, and the incident commander notified 911 that he was going to need manpower, that we were not going to be the fast to activate the next town over as the fast and have them responding, and that he was going to need our manpower when we got on the scene. Because I'm in my command vehicle, I left my house, I'm immediately en route. Everybody else, other than the other chief that responded, is going to the firehouse to crew the apparatus. I got on the scene. I walked up to the command post, who was the captain at the time, and I asked him what he needed. And there was still a lot of back and forth at that point of time over where water was coming from, right? What standpipes were charged, what lines were in the building. There was still some back and forth, and I don't think the outside understood the questions that the inside was asking, right? So there was that initial line, which Stephen talked about from the beginning, was still laying on the ground uncharged at the front door. And when I walked up to the command post, I said to the captain, "Hey, do you need anything? My crew's on the way. I've got X number of guys." He said to me, "Brian, can you do me a favor?" He said, "Can you follow this hand line and see where the hell it goes?" He said, "They keep calling for water and line, and this thing's laying here. It's got no water in it. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do with it." Right. So I ended up following that hand line in, which went, he hit the nail on the head. It went down the hall, hit the stairwell. There was a pile of spaghetti in the one landing. I went up a couple floors. There was a pile of spaghetti in that landing. And then eventually I got to the 5th floor, and somewhere in between there, I found where they had disconnected it and used some of that line to make their remaining standpipe connection. When I say that stairwell was utter freaking chaos, it absolutely was. I mean, there was, I don't know how many firemen were in that stairwell, but there was quite a few. There was troopers hanging out in the stairwell. There was, I think I passed at least one, Liberty police officer that was just kind of like hanging out in the stairwell. People were still doing their best to move occupants out of the building from the lower floor. So you still had all this stuff going on, along with an evacuation. What ended up happening was, once I got up to the 5th floor, was when the initial assistant chief that went in with Stephen, that was still hunkered down in that room, kept calling out that he was out of air. His bottle was now out of air. He was hunkered down with this woman. He was all right. They were hanging out in the window, but he really wanted to get her out of there. And would somebody, bring him a bottle or bring him an SCBA so they could get this woman out of that room that was hunkered down. I ended up going down there with a crew of guys from Monticello, who we operate, the fast team with. We ended up going down there and accessing him. It was there was a smoke condition in the room, but it wasn't terrible. He had a towel behind the door and the whole 9 yards. They were just kind of chilling. And that's when we talked to him. He said that he was all right to hang out until that bottle got up there. We walked back, I think, out into the hallway, as we were walking back out into the hallway, that's when the Mayday hits. We hear him. That same chief just happened to look back out the window. Now, I don't know if he heard that ground transmission or not. All right. But he looks out the window, sees Stephen literally hanging out the window, committed. And that's when he calls the Mayday.
Okay.
Me and one of the other guys immediately head down the hall, because we knew it was, we had an idea as to which room they were in based on where they identified them when they called the Mayday. We went down the hall. The one guy that was with me, we immediately went into the room. He started heading pretty much directly across the room to where Stephen was. They yelled back to me, "Grab the hose line and knock this fire out." All right. There's fire to the left. They said, "Grab the hose line, hit the fire." The hose line was still right there at the door. All right. So I grabbed the hose line. I started advancing in. All right. As I start advancing in with the hose is when Lieutenant Bradley gets handed off to me. So I grab him. I put the hose line back down. I grab him. I take him out into the hall, bring him to the fire escape, which is literally like right there, right? Bring him into the fire escape. At this point in time, I didn't hear over the radio that Stephen had been identified. I didn't hear them say Lieutenant Vogler. I just heard them say a Mayday, right? Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. So when Bradley gets handed off to me, I'm assuming he's my Mayday, right? So I get him out to the stairwell. I call 911 on the radio. I tell him, be advised, just pulled Lieutenant Bradley out of the room. They call me back and say, you have the Mayday. I said, I'm not sure if I have the Mayday. I have Lieutenant Bradley. I said, please confirm that he's the Mayday. That's when the assistant chief calls in and says, negative. The Mayday is Lieutenant Vogler, not Lieutenant Bradley. So again, perfect example. We think we're going for one, and
you ended up with two.
And we ended up with two, right? Mm-hmm. So once that was cleared up, the fast team was still coming up the stairs, but they were behind a whole bunch of guys that were just in and on the landing.
Just hanging out.
Just basically hanging out. So
firefighters love stairwells.
Yeah. So I yelled to one of the guys that I know, because I saw that he had a RIT bag. I said, give me the RIT bag. I said, just give me the RIT bag. And you could tell they were trying to get up there, but I was like, we don't have time. Just give me the RIT bag. He handed me the RIT bag. I went back inside, met the other Monticello guy who was still hanging out with Stephen. I pulled the mask out to see if we're going to put him on air and take him out. And he's like, the bucket's coming up. We're going to put him in the bucket. I was like, okay, perfect. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. And Monticello's bucket ended up getting to the window. He got into the bucket, and the rest is a ride to the hospital.
Were you able to get the fire knocked down in that short blast before you got handed
I never touched
Bradley, or
I never opened that bail. Somebody did.
Gotcha.
Somebody grabbed that line and hit that fire quick. I don't know who did it. Like it when I tell you it was a blur from hitting the door to Bradley being handed out to getting back with him and him being out the window. I don't remember. It's like that sports mode. We talk about that sports mode all the time, right? When you get into the game and you're doing your thing, and it's just all a blur, like like him being in the window. I tell guys all the time, like your skills when you can deploy them, and you look back and you're like, oh shit, how'd I do that?
How did I do that?
Yeah, how did I do that? But
right.
But somebody hit the fire. I don't have a clue. No clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So get Stephen out into the bucket. Get him down. They're trying to take care of him.
I could give you my perspective from me being in the window.
Yeah, please.
That's an interesting piece there. So I get out into the window. I'm hanging by my rope, and I see Monticello's ladder truck pulling up, which was a nice sight to see. My ladder truck's just sitting like it's parked at Dunkin' Donuts getting coffee. There's nobody around. So Monticello's, not to throw any shade at my own department, but that's what's going on. And meanwhile,
wait, hold on. And we identified that the other night. Again, we got to identify the things, the missteps, right? So, the misstep is, the operator of the rig said that he had been called to do something else. He was running equipment up the street or whatever, because they were calling for SCBAs. They were calling for this. They were calling for that, right? That could happen anywhere. We know that. When we always say, right, I've had plenty of conversations with my chauffeurs, like, you guys, your job is to be at the rig. Like, your job is to not abandon the rig. 9 times out of 10, that doesn't come back to bite us, right? This time he's running equipment, and you've got a rig sitting there that could potentially save your life. And like you said, there was nobody there. So, okay, sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. So the mutual aid ladder truck shows up on scene. They're trying to set up, but our ladder truck is right in the way. So I'm watching a group of guys down there who turned out to be the incoming fast team. I'm watching all of them running around in circles. They don't know what to do because our ladder truck's there. There's no driver. They're like, well, can we just move it? Yes, please move our ladder truck out of the way and put your ladder truck up, which they ended up doing. So thank God for them, they got their ladder set up real quick. And meanwhile, you guys come in, you get Bradley out. I'm still hanging in the window, which I'm more than happy to be hanging in the window because after being in the room with my back of my head melting off, I was happy to be there. But I think you said one of the other guys comes in and gets me. He said, "Hey, brother, I got you. I'm going to get you out of here." And to show you how disorienting this room was, he brought me right into that kitchen that we kept getting trapped in. And at that point, nope, I'm sucking air. I have no air left in my bottle. There's only one way I'm going out, and it's back out that window. I ran right back to that window and waited for the ladder truck to come get me. And then it keeps going after that. So we get up into the bucket, and it's guys from another mutual aid company that are running the bucket. And you have that mutual aid chief, he's still hunkered down in that same room. He's got no air left. So we made the decision there to bring the bucket over to him and bring a Scott pack. Give one of those guys took the Scott pack off their back and gave it to him so he could get out.
Yeah.
So the bucket was the key for rescuing.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we talk about, these chaotic scenes where, everybody kind of ends up. So it was Monticello's tower ladder. All right. Obviously one of their guys was operating the tower ladder at the bottom. In the bucket was my car 3 and another firefighter from Loch Sheldrake Fire Department. So it was, you had three departments, right, in a piece of two guys, of which it's not even their piece of apparatus, right? They're up in the ladder, and one of my other guys ended up moving their ladder truck out of the way, right? Just because somebody said to him, "Hey, can you drive this thing?" And he was like, "Hell yeah, I can drive it." They're like, "Good, well, get it out of the way, because if we don't get it out of the way, we're not gonna be able to put up this other tower ladder." So, yeah. So, and that was one of the things we identified as well afterwards, because, we're sitting there talking and we're like, all right, so we had 2 ladder trucks there, one on the scene and one arriving, right? We know we've got firefighters operating on the 5th floor, right? Where should those trucks be? Regardless of whether there's guys jumping out of the windows or not. We hope that they're not going to be jumping out of the windows, but where should those trucks be? It's not a surround and drown, right? We're not putting them up in the air to flow water, right? So yeah, hopefully.
I think that's a big thing in the county is, understanding that the ladder truck is more than just like the surround and drown. I've been to a bunch of fires here in this county where, we go to the fire and the ladder truck just sits there until they want to put the fire out, and then they put it up in the air. But I mean, it just goes to show, like, it's a useful tool for any fire, really. I mean, it's going to save someone's life. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it sounds like you had people all along that corridor on the 5th floor that were either sheltering in place or were not aware of how to escape.
Yeah.
Right. So if you, had that information, if that information had been passed down, maybe those aerials could have been set up a little bit sooner as well,
Yeah.
And if rather than keep sending people interior to try to get people out, I mean, that's, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but you've got a perfectly good ladder truck sitting outside.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about equipment for a minute, right? Like we gotta throw that out there, right? So I asked Steven the other night, right? Because we're at this after action, right? Everybody knows the guy he had a beautiful babushka on the other night. His head was wrapped up nice. He looked really good. Of course, everybody's glad to see him. But nobody's talking about the fact of there was some missing PPE, right, in this whole scenario. And I asked him flat out, I said, hey, listen, dude, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're the guy that should tell this story, right? Like it shouldn't come from me to my guys saying, hey, this is why we wear our hoods. I want my guys to hear from you, the guy who's sitting there with the freaking burnt ears, why this shit's so important, so I think we got to do that here as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it comes down to complacency. We talk about complacency all the time. You go to the same place over and over again, and it's an activator alarm or it's a culinary disaster, and you don't put your hood on. Well, I know better. I should be setting the example for my guys and always wearing a hood, but the one time you don't wear it is the time it will get you. It got me.
Yeah.
The other thing we talked about was having a portable radio. I'm an officer. I should have a portable radio. I have one. And where was it during this fire? And the charger on the rig, where it ends up being half the time I need it.
Right in the parking lot. It was perfect. Yeah. Perfect placement.
And the other lieutenant that was with me, he did have a portable radio. But we talk about this too. When you have a portable radio, you got to put it under your jacket, because he had a radio, but it was melted. The wires were melted on it. It was completely useless.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and we didn't bring that up. We didn't bring that up.
You got to put it on your jacket when you do have it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, because I didn't realize that. Yeah, so he did have a portable radio, and I saw it when we got outside. I mean, his hood was pretty dark and had some nice burn spots in it. His helmet was a little screwed up. The wire on his portable was completely melted. So yeah, that's a good point. Proper donning of your PPE and how to don your portable radio with your PPE. Very, very valuable point to make. And again, who knows? Who knows what channel he was on? If anybody, one thing that I said the other night was the 911 center's handling of the Mayday was very good. All right. It happened on the Firecom channel, which, isn't typically where it's going to happen, but it happened on the Firecom channel. I think what's important for people to understand is because it happened on the Firecom channel, they immediately toned out that there's a Mayday on the air. They immediately, made the notification to, basically cease unessential traffic. But because it happened on the main channel, that's pretty tough to do. So you still got mini pumpers. You got mini pumpers calling in from 7 departments over that they're responding to the call. Meanwhile, this guy's hanging out the window and we're trying to effect a rescue here, So the fact that it happened on the main channel was troublesome and a bit of a problem. And the fact that, people, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say, everybody always thinks their radio transmission is the most important radio transmission in the world. And when you have really 911's only option at that point, because our Mayday procedure is that the channel that the Mayday occurs on is basically locked down and given to the Mayday, and all other operations will go to another channel. Well, when it's on your main fire communications channel, the only other channel that we have that will do the same thing is the EMS comm channel. So really their only option was to say, hey, we need everybody to move over to EMS comm except for the Mayday, right? Mm-hmm. That didn't happen. But we didn't need it to happen either. But, so again, this, the use of the radio, how to use the radio, trying to use our tactical channels, it all plays in, and people don't understand how it plays in until shit goes wrong.
It's all of the, everything that you guys have been talking about really from start to finish here is a million of the small things that come together as big things if they're not done, or if they're not done in the same way every time. And that's like what Stephen says, complacency is what is what happens, right? You don't think that you're going to need it, or you're doing that bad habit of putting the radio mic around, the back of your coat, instead of putting it up under your coat. All of those little things that we do, just out of complacency, they add up into, then you have a bigger problem, and then you have more big problems, right?
Right.
So all the little things are actually big things in disguise.
Sure. And look, what I find interesting, which I didn't know until I got up to their firehouse the other night, is the fact that, and I'm sure this is what frustrates these guys a little bit, is the fact that not only did they train on that building, right, but they trained on that exact apartment, right? So that, yeah, that's, I'm sure that kind of hits deep a little bit when you're like, damn, like we did, I mean, look, you did what you want to do, right? You identified a trouble building. Not only did you identify a trouble building, you trained on a trouble building. You trained in the exact spot where you had a fire in a trouble building, right? And then some things went wrong, right? And look, why did they go wrong? I mean, complacency is probably a part of it. Probably everybody coming to that initial call was like, this is just another bullshit activated alarm, right?
Yeah, I think when it first went out, it was, I mean, I'll call it how it is. Some of the guys that were there, that were in those initial roles, they weren't at drills at that time for whatever reason. And so there was kind of that breaking communication. I mean, we have our 6 to 8 guys that, we remember exactly what to do in that building.
Right.
We've been talking about it all week. Should have been, if the original 6 guys that pay attention to training were there, it would have been a 15-minute fire and we've been done with. But so you said complacency, and guys who, may not be into it or may not have the availability to kind of show up to drills, they missed that night. And because they missed that night, it was the whole, it was kind of like a what the fuck moment. Like when it happened, just kind of, what do I do now? So.
Yeah.
And Stephen, when you guys initially trained in that room, I'm assuming it was unoccupied. Was it just an empty room that they gave you to train in?
Yep, I had actually been there for, unfortunately, unattended death. And that's when I met the property manager, and he was cleaning out that room. So it was perfect for us to go there and train on it.
Right. And then when you went back in, though, it's an unrecognizable room because you know the layout a little bit, but then the whole dynamic of the room has been changed by hoarding conditions.
Absolutely, yep.
Right. And so it's like you said, it changed the whole layout, even though in your head, I've been in here before, I know what it's supposed to look like. That doesn't mean that that's what's going on. Those pathways and the way that you can get in and out and the way things are moved around, those are things that you can't predict.
Absolutely.
We try to do a really good job in training, especially when we do on-site trainings and we're going out in the community and trying to get to know the buildings in our first due area. Those are all like such important things to do. But there's variables that you are not going to be able to predict. And, I look at some of these home design magazines and home design shows and stuff like that. And they've got, people putting bunk beds in closets now as like space savers for, to make more room for kids in their bedrooms. And, people are doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and we can't predict those things as much as we train. Right. So I think that that's really important for people listening and for people, that are going to watch, to remember and put in perspective. Just because you've trained on a building before when it's an empty room doesn't mean that it's going to be like that once you get inside in an emergency.
Absolutely. Also to hit on, pre-COVID, me and Cecil were doing some awesome training. We had a department training committee organized. We were doing awesome training every week, but you could lead the horse to water, you can't make them drink it. That particular drill that we did on that building, we had probably over 20 people there. But of those 20 people, who was really paying attention, who was into it and took the time to learn and retain the knowledge, and who didn't? I mean, and it really showed at that fire. I mean, some of our we're a unique department. We're really heavy on officers. We have a lot of officers. If you're a captain in my department, you should know that's really our only building that has a standpipe system. You should know how a standpipe works, where it is, and how it's used, and how do we use it properly. And that's one of the points we failed on.
Yeah. So when we did that drill, it was everything from apparatus placement to what to pump the standpipes at. And, it was disheartening to get there. And like Steven said, to see them stretching that line through the stairwell, to see there was no engine at the fire department connection, all these different things that kind of just like, you walk up and you're like, what the hell? Like we went over this, we know how it goes. And it was just not it, wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, and I think you guys hit the nail on the head. Listen, we've all been to those drills where you've got, you have 20 guys there and you have 10 of them that are really into it and want to learn and want to figure out how we can do this better. God forbid we have an incident. And then you have another 10 that are there, but not really there. They're like,
Right.
they're there in body, but they're not there in mind. They're not really listening to what's going on. They're not really paying attention. It's just as important for the pump operator to understand how to access the standpipe and how to supply the standpipe, but he also needs to know the layout of the building and how long is it going to take my guys to access that 5th floor, and and what might they experience when they get there. All of this stuff ties into one another. It's important that they understand the everybody's jobs, regardless of whether they're actually going to be doing that job or not. Right.
Right. And it's important to make sure everybody has a job and knows what their job is, right?
Sure.
I mean, because that sounds like that was a big issue too, where you just ended up having an influx of people, but those people didn't necessarily know what their role was or know where they were supposed to be assigned or what they were supposed to be doing at the time.
Yeah. I think with a lot of the mutual aid too, I mean, it's not often, it's a rarity in our own district and in some of the districts we called to get that standpipe operation. So
Sure.
When they show up, most of us, most people would just kind of look for work and see what needs to be done, but it was totally foreign to a lot of people we're calling. So they were just kind of waiting to be told what to do. And there was nothing coming down on exactly what to do.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, look, what you guys experience isn't unique. That's for sure. I mean, I've gone to fires in my own district where, people get in that mode, right? That complacency. It's just another run.
Yep.
I can think of one very, very vividly where, I went inside, same thing, came out as a chimney fire, got in there and there was like legit fire in the wall, right? Scanned the wall quick with my thermal imaging camera. I was like, oh shit, this is actually a fire, and I walk out and the initial engine's sitting there. And of course there's some guys getting all the gear and they're starting to stretch a line, but now second engine pulls up, tanker pulls up, and everybody's just kind of like chilling. Hey bro, what's going on? What are you doing for lunch? What'd you do last night? And I come out and I'm like, guys, we got a fire. Like, hook the engine to the engine, hook the tanker to the, like, let's go. Let's start, let's get some shit going here. And I look at you like, whoa. I'm like, yeah, it's actually a fire. So look, it happens. Thankfully this one, we can talk about this one and learn from it. Right.
Absolutely.
Anything that you guys want to point out before we start to wrap it up?
I mean, really just the importance of training, man. I mean, from wearing your gear to know everything in your district, because the one building that you might not think is going to light on fire is going to eventually catch on fire. Just be ready for it.
Yeah. Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to do a big thanks because obviously my training is what saved my life. And I wanted to thank you and the training here in Sullivan County, and not only that, but my time down in Missouri with the Waynesville Rural Fire Department. I spent a few years down there, got some awesome training and experience, and recently with the federal career side of firefighting as well. I'm blessed to have the experience and training that I do, and ultimately that's what saved my life.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yeah. Listen, can't say it enough. Things worked out the way they did. We got a lot of lessons to learn from it, but the alternative, we all know is much worse, and when I look at this thing, like I said, I've been, kind of playing it over and over again quite a few times over the last few days. And I was thinking to myself, well, had this gone bad, and if there was a NIOSH report created, like what would they point out in that NIOSH report, right? There's always those bullet points of what could have been, what could have been done better. And, it's all the same common stuff that is in just
Mhm.
about every single one you read. So, when we were at the after action the other night, and you could tell some guys were starting to get a little, like, they're pointing fingers, it's not about pointing fingers, right? It's just about
Right.
learning and understanding how we can do it better. And what I came up with was, had this been something a hell of a lot worse, what would have been documented would have been accountability, command and control, staging, PPE, communications, right? Pick up just about, I bet you if you pick up 90% of the LODDs in the US and read the NIOSH report, I bet you're going to read at least 4 of those, right? So, it's
No
not about
doubt.
pointing fingers. It's just about, learning how we can do it better. And that's the name of the game. Carrie, you got
There's a
anything
big
you want to?
difference. I just want to just, yeah, underline that there's a big difference between judgment and education. You can point fingers and judge and, say, "Well, that would never happen here, that would never happen there," or, there's so many of the internet warriors that cannot wait to get their fingers on the keys to start slashing people about things. But the education piece is really far more important and far more valuable to the fire service and the work that we're doing than judgment will ever be.
Oh yeah.
And I think that the willingness to have these discussions and be open about, and honest about, this is what went down and this is what we can do differently in the future is a real benefit to everybody. And thankfully, everybody's here to have that conversation. So that's what we should be focused on.
Yeah, I got to talk about the keyboard warriors for a minute before we get off. I got it. You open the window. So I got to tell you guys, I had to shut off the commenting where I shared the video because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. I mean, there was more questions about rope deployment than I care to answer. And he had a rope and was deploying it. So like enough of that. Right. I got a, one was he was hanging out of the window on his rope outside of the window, and your brother came up in the ladder truck and rescued you out of the ladder truck. I got that one. I was like, well, sorry, bro, that's bullshit, because I know the guy that was in the window. I talked to his brother the day after the fire. I talked to his dad. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. Don't know what to tell you. I tell you, people have an unbelievable knack for writing their own narrative. And if they can do it from behind a keyboard, it is freaking amazing. Like, you were one step away from being fucking Superman and flying out of that window. I'm telling you, or, having fucking Spider-Man come down from the roof and grab you. It's people.
It's nice to be able to get the story out to clear the air and say what actually happened, because
Yeah.
we know if you don't give the news a story, they make their own, and we found that out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've seen it. It's
Yeah,
been pretty crazy this week with all the different things that apparently happened. So
Yeah. So, all right, Kara, any last thoughts?
Nope. I appreciate you guys greatly coming on. It's so important, and I think that there's a lot to learn from the experiences that you went through. And I do, just because of the St. Florian Fitness thing, I have to just also say that this is the time when firefighter wellness begins. Like, make sure that you're taking care of each other and acknowledging what happened was a big deal, and acknowledging that there's going to be days where probably those scenarios are going to play out in your head over and over again, and don't discount that, and don't think that you should ever be at a point where you're just over it and you can't talk about it anymore. I really want to put that out there, because wellness is a big part of what I preach, and I think it's so important. And it has to start now, not 6 months or a year from now, when people are like, why aren't you sleeping? Why aren't you eating? You know, why haven't you been down to the firehouse? Like, you know, make sure that you're taking care of yourselves and taking care of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Well, guys, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing the story. You know, obviously, being there, I got to experience some of it with you guys, but I appreciate you guys as firefighters and good firefighters that want to do the right thing, and you know, sharing this with everybody, I think is definitely. I'm glad you were willing to do it, right? Because a lot of guys would not. So I appreciate you, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks
Thanks for
me on,
having
bro.
us.
All right, guys, stay safe.
Take care.